Welcome to the debate. Historically, finding a fingerprint on a document or a piece of art was really the ultimate proof of humanity.
Right, it meant someone was actually physically there.
Exactly. They touched the canvas, they held the pen. It was this undeniable physical residue of human agency.
The absolute baseline for authenticity. I mean, if you had the fingerprint, you had the person.
But today, we're trying to engineer the exact opposite. We are attempting to embed this invisible synthetic fingerprint into our text, our code, and our images.
Yeah, not to prove a human was there, but to prove a machine was.
Right. So today we are unpacking the central issue of mandatory AI watermarking in foundational models. Specifically, we're looking at systems like Claude and Gemini.
Which is a push being aggressively driven by major regulatory frameworks right now, most notably the EU AI Act.
And it is a fascinating, highly consequential tension. We are looking at this fundamental clash between the desire to protect society from deepfakes and mass misinformation on one side,
And on the other, the very real risk of creating this pervasive, almost creepy surveillance mechanism that monitors and tags our intellectual output.
My stance on this is pretty straightforward, honestly. I believe that watermarking and establishing strict provenance are just necessary safeguards.
Even with the drawbacks?
Yeah, we need them to maintain public trust. We have to protect society in a world where, frankly, synthetic content is becoming completely indistinguishable from human creation.
Well, and I come at it from a completely different way. I believe that mandatory watermarking fundamentally misunderstands human-AI co-creation.
How so?
It creates this massive chilling effect. It penalizes legitimate users while at the same time, completely failing to stop the actual malicious actors.
Okay, let's begin by laying out the foundation of why these regulatory frameworks are being championed in the first place.
Sure.
The EU AI Act and similar directives, they're grounded in a critical societal need, which researchers call epistemic security.
Right, epistemic security.
Yeah, and for those who might not use that term every day, it basically means the structural integrity of what society knows to be true.
The shared baseline of reality.
Exactly, because we are moving incredibly fast toward a reality where an image of a politician doing something illegal or a highly technical medical document can just be perfectly synthesized by a machine in seconds.
Oh, absolutely. The speed is staggering.
So the intent of regulation here is about protecting humans from a collapsed information ecosystem. It's about avoiding a world where literally no one knows what is real anymore.
But the method they're choosing.
Well, regulators just want to establish a digital passport for content. In my view, this isn't about surveillance. It is entirely about accountability.
A digital passport, though, implies a border check on thought.
Foundational models must be required to tag their data so that society can trace the origins of potentially harmful synthetic output. It just provides a necessary chain of custody for the digital world.
I get the intention, I really do. But when you look closely at the actual architecture required to mandate that digital passport, it looks significantly less like accountability and, well, much more like a scarlet letter.
A scarlet letter? That's a bit extreme, isn't it?
Not really. What we're actually doing is attempting this massive architectural shift toward an internet of provenance. It's an environment where content is presumed guilty until proven human.
But it's just a tag.
It's more than that. When a tool like Claude subtly alters its underlying math to mark your output, it transforms what should be a deeply private personal creative canvas into a monitored, state-audited utility.
I wouldn't call it state-audited.
But it is audited by the architecture itself. And that is going to stifle mass adoption. It's going to push away the very people who could use AI to solve complex global problems simply because they don't want their brainstorming sessions tagged and tracked.
I think we really need to dig into that idea of the scarlet letter and how these systems actually operate. Because when you use the phrase guilty until proven human, it suggests that the watermark is inherently punitive.
It operates that way in practice.
But let's look at the practical reality of how we use these tools today. We are entering an era of one-click generation.
Right, the scale is massive.
Someone can just spin up an army of autonomous agents to write tens of thousands of articles, or political posts, or financial analyses in seconds. The sheer volume and asymmetry of that capability is exactly why we need a binary indicator of origin.
But that is exactly where the framework breaks down. To understand why this is so problematic, we really need to look at how watermarking actually works under the hood.
Okay, break it down for us.
When an AI like Claude generates text, it doesn't think in whole sentences. It thinks in tokens, which are basically chunks of words. And it constantly calculates the probability of what the next most logical token should be.
Right, so if the prompt is, the sky is, the AI knows the word blue has a very high probability.
Precisely. It's highly advanced in next word prediction. Now, to create a watermark, the system introduces a secret algorithmic filter. It divides the AI's entire vocabulary into a green list and a red list.
Okay.
To embed this invisible mathematical signature, the AI is basically forced to disproportionately choose words from the green list, even if a word on the red list would have been the more accurate or natural or creative choice.
So it's tweaking the probability.
It is subtly degrading the quality of the output to hide a tracking code inside the sentence structure. And it does this using a flat binary system that completely misunderstands how thoughtful people actually collaborate with AI.
How so?
Well, it treats a deeply collaborative human masterpiece, a situation where a user spends, say, 5 hours debating an idea with Claude, refining the logic, shaping the tone, exactly the same as a zero-effort, one-click spam article.
I see the frustration there, but
The flat watermark strips away the nuance of human effort. It punishes the co-creator by stamping their hard-earned intellectual output with the exact same tag used for automated garbage.
look, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective.
Go ahead.
Think of watermarking like mandatory nutritional labels on our food supply.
Nutritional labels?
Yeah, before the FDA mandated nutritional labels, you simply didn't know what was in the box. Now the label doesn't judge the recipe.
Okay, but
Let me finish this thought. It doesn't tell you whether the meal is a masterful 5-hour culinary creation cooked by a top chef or just a cheap, highly processed snack thrown together in a factory. It simply tells the consumer what ingredients are inside so they can make an informed choice.
right. But food labels and digital tracking are very different.
But the principle is the same. Why should intellectual transparency, the simple disclosure of digital ingredients, be viewed as a punishment rather than a basic consumer right in the information age?
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Okay.
The nutritional label analogy completely falls apart because a label on a box of cereal doesn't trigger automated professional penalties or algorithmic discrimination.
Neither does a watermark inherently.
Ingredient list doesn't get your resume automatically thrown out of an applicant tracking system because it flagged positive for corn syrup. In the digital ecosystem, an AI watermark carries immediate punitive downstream effects.
You think people will be actively penalized for it?
We are already seeing the foundation for it. There is this deeply thought-provoking essay circulating right now among AI developers, written under the pseudonym Morpheus Thinks.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, the author argues that mandatory watermarking could actually lead to the very first form of human discrimination towards AI.
Meaning we would reject the work just because a machine helped make it?
Exactly. Imagine a brilliant junior programmer writing a piece of highly efficient code, or a non-native English speaker using AI to perfectly format a business proposal.
Which happens all the time now.
Right. If that text carries a watermark, automated scanners in HR departments or academic institutions will flag it. The recipient will see the flag, assume it was zero-effort spam, and just discard it.
That is a risk, yes. But
By mandating these invisible tags, we are completely ignoring the natural intelligence and the intrinsic merit of the output itself. We are judging the origin rather than the quality. It creates a paradigm where humans will abandon using AI to scale their productivity simply out of fear of that societal and professional surveillance.
But if we don't judge the origin at all, how do we establish a baseline of truth?
By evaluating the actual content.
But we can't rely entirely on the post hoc evaluation of merit when the scale of the information being generated is literally in the billions of tokens per second.
It's a challenge, sure.
It's impossible. Even if the system is somewhat binary, forcing transparent major companies like Anthropic and Google to watermark their text establishes a necessary friction.
Friction for the good guys, maybe.
Having some form of centralized capability to audit sentences or images is really the only way to prevent malicious actors from completely flooding the internet with deepfakes and synthetic propaganda. Without that friction, the information ecosystem simply collapses under the weight of its own synthetic noise.
That actually brings us to what is perhaps the most glaring flaw in this entire regulatory approach, the unintended irony of the mandate itself.
Unintended irony?
Yeah, we have to ask who actually bears the burden of this friction you're talking about. The irony of the EU AI Act and similar directives is that they are designed to protect society from malicious actors, but they fundamentally fail to understand the behavior of those actors.
How so? The law applies to the models they use.
If Anthropic and Google are forced to watermark all their outputs, the only people who will be penalized and saddled with tracked, monitored text are the legitimate, well-meaning professionals using these tools to increase their productivity.
Wait, you are suggesting the malicious actors will simply bypass the major platforms entirely?
Absolutely. The people building deep fakes or mass disinformation campaigns, they are not logging into a commercial web interface and politely agreeing to the terms of service.
True, but
They are building rogue open-source models on underground servers. And we need to clarify what an open weight model is here.
right, explain that for our audience.
When a company releases open weights, they are essentially giving away the entire underlying brain of the AI. Anyone can download it to their own physical hard drive.
Without any oversight.
Exactly. So a bad actor downloads a highly capable open weight model, opens up the underlying code, and simply deletes the lines of Python that enforce that green list and red list modern marking logic we talked about.
Just strips it right out.
The watermark is gone. The result is perfectly untraceable high-quality text for the bad guys and a pervasive surveillance net for everyday professionals. The regulation entirely misses its target.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, to be honest, because it relies on a fallacy of perfection.
Fallacy of perfection?
Yeah. Think about it in terms of currency. Just because laws against counterfeiting don't stop all counterfeiters from trying to print fake money, we don't abolish the mint.
That's a different scenario.
Is it? We don't stop putting security threads, holograms, and watermarks in our $100 bills just because some underground syndicate with a highly sophisticated printing press might figure out how to evade them.
But physical currency is highly centralized.
The existence of a bad actor loophole doesn't negate the necessity of systemic safeguards. Yes, rogue models will exist on decentralized servers, but creating a norm, a standard of provenance for the vast majority of legitimate commercial AI interactions, it creates a massive herd immunity in the information ecosystem.
Herd immunity?
Yeah. Most people will consume information through major platforms, and if those platforms require watermarks, we can at least filter out the bulk of the synthetic noise. Why abandon the concept of provenance altogether just because a few dedicated bad actors will attempt to evade it?
Look, that's a compelling argument. But have you considered the actual cost of that herd immunity?
I think the cost of doing nothing is higher.
You are comparing information to currency, but thought is not currency. When a centralized authority mandates the tracking of physical currency, it is managing economics.
Right.
When a centralized authority mandates the tracking of thoughts, sentences, and artistic outputs, it is attempting to create a monopoly on truth. And the cost of that monopoly is catastrophic for user trust.
I really want to push back on the idea of a monopoly on truth. If the tracking is simply an invisible cryptographic signature that says, a machine helped generate this, how does that harm the user's trust?
Because of what it represents.
It doesn't tell the centralized authority what you're thinking, just what tools you used.
Because it changes the fundamental psychological relationship between the human and the machine.
In what way?
If users realize that every time they use an AI to brainstorm a sensitive business strategy, or write a deeply personal piece of creative fiction, or draft a complex piece of proprietary code, that it is being tagged and cataloged by an architecture designed to trace it back to its origin, they will leave.
You think they'll just abandon the best tools?
We will see massive user flight. People who value their privacy, who want true ownership over their human AI co-creations, will abandon the major, secure, aligned platforms.
And go where?
They will gravitate toward those localized, open-source AI models we just talked about. They will run them directly on their own MacBooks, completely offline, totally free from corporate telemetry or regulatory tracking.
And you see that localized flight as a negative consequence of regulation, rather than just a natural evolution of the technology?
I think the regulation forces it in a messy way.
Because many people argue that AI running locally on personal devices is exactly where the technology is heading anyway.
I see it as a direct consequence of an environment of mass tracking, which accelerates the flight in a dangerous way. The regulation is trying to force a centralized audit on what is inherently a decentralized technology.
But that audit is for safety.
If society is pushed toward a presumption of guilt, where your text is deemed suspicious unless proven human, the natural human reaction is to seek privacy.
I get that.
The tragedy here is that this wedge will drive legitimate users away from the most capable, alignment-tested, safe models developed by major labs, pushing them into isolated environments just to escape the creepy tracking mechanism of the watermark.
But let's seriously look at the alternative you are proposing. You are essentially advocating for an untethered ecosystem, a world without provenance.
I'm advocating for evaluating the work, not the tool.
If we treat AI simply as an extension of human thought, much like the calculator, the spell checker, or the printing press, as you and others have suggested, we are still dealing with a difference in kind, not just a difference in degree.
How so?
Because a spell checker doesn't invent a fake historical event out of whole cloth. A calculator doesn't hallucinate a defamatory claim about a real person and weave it into a perfectly formatted news article.
That's true. The generative capability is new.
These digital minds are generative. They create novel information. If we cannot track the origin of a thought, how do we protect the information ecosystem at scale?
By holding the publisher accountable, not the AI.
We are talking about a world where human and machine outputs are blended perfectly, seamlessly. Can society truly afford to completely shift away from provenance?
Yes, society must shift away from provenance, because provenance of thought in the AI era is a dangerous illusion.
A dangerous illusion? The only viable path forward is to stop tracking the origin of a thought and instead verify the value and accuracy of the output itself. We must judge text by its truth, its utility, and its beauty, not by checking its digital passport.
But how do we actually do that in practice, at the speed the internet moves?
The hard way, through rigorous evaluation.
The hard way doesn't scale.
It has to. If a piece of medical research is generated through human-AI collaboration, its validity should be tested through scientific peer review, not rejected out of hand because a scanner detected a watermark in the abstract.
Okay, sure, in peer review. But what about the daily news feed?
If an article claims a geopolitical event happened, we verify the sources, just as we would if a human wrote it. We have to treat AI outputs based entirely on their own merit.
But people don't have time for that. If we spend all our energy and billions of dollars building a massive, fragile surveillance apparatus to hunt for AI watermarks, we are fundamentally distracted. We are distracting ourselves from doing the actual hard work of media literacy, critical thinking, and factual verification.
So your position is that the origin is completely irrelevant as long as the output is accurate or valuable.
Essentially, yes.
But that assumes a world where everyone has the time, the education, and the resources to manually verify the value of everything they consume.
We have to build better systemic verification tools then.
The reality of human psychology is that we rely on heuristics. We rely on knowing where information came from to decide if we should trust it.
But those heuristics are already broken.
If an article about a breaking geopolitical crisis is entirely synthetically generated by an adversarial state actor, the time it takes for independent journalists to verify its truth might be longer than the time it takes for that article to go viral and spark a real-world conflict.
Which is a real threat. I acknowledge that.
The watermark serves as that necessary high-speed heuristic. It flags the system before the damage is done.
And yet, as we discussed earlier, the adversarial state actor simply turns the watermark off at the code level. So your high-speed heuristic only flags the people who are playing by the rules.
It still creates a baseline.
No, it creates a massive false sense of security. You look at a document, it has no watermark, and your heuristic tells you to assume it is a trusted human creation.
Right.
When in reality, it is a highly targeted deepfake generated by a rogue model. The regulation creates the exact vulnerability it is trying to prevent, while simultaneously penalizing the legitimate user who spent 5 hours co-creating a masterpiece.
This brings us to a really vital point where we can, I think, step back and look at the whole picture.
Sure, let's zoom out.
To summarize the regulatory position, mandatory watermarking represents an earnest and perhaps mechanically flawed attempt to preserve trust and combat misinformation in an unprecedentedly fast-changing ecosystem.
An attempt, yes.
Establishing a chain of provenance is viewed by policymakers as a necessary foundational layer. It's to ensure that as synthetic media scales, humanity doesn't completely lose its grip on the origin of its information. It is an attempt to build a dam before the floodwaters arrive.
And to summarize the opposing perspective, mandatory watermarking operates as an ineffective surveillance mechanism.
Fair enough.
It fundamentally misunderstands the highly nuanced, collaborative nature of AI. It punishes legitimate users with algorithmic discrimination, entirely fails to stop rogue actors because of the open weight loophole, and pushes society toward a presumption of guilt that forces users to abandon mainstream secure platforms in search of basic privacy.
Yet, despite these deeply contrasting views on the solution, there is a clear point of convergence here.
I think so, yeah.
It seems we both agree that the current binary implementation of watermarking, the flat stamping of output without any regard for the human effort or creativity involved, creates severe friction.
Absolutely. The binary nature of the technology right now, forcing probability distributions into green and red lists, is entirely mismatched with the reality of how humans and AI actually interact.
Right.
Our ultimate mutual goal is ensuring that AI can be safely adopted to solve complex global problems. The disagreement is purely about whether mass surveillance of outputs helps or hinders that mass adoption.
The tension between the need for a digital passport for information to maintain epistemic security and the vital privacy of human-AI collaboration clearly remains unresolved.
Very much so.
It forces us to ask deep questions about how we integrate these digital minds into our daily workflows and whether our traditional concepts of intellectual property, authenticity, and origin even apply to this technology anymore.
There is definitely much more to explore in the source material regarding how we treat this entirely new species of natural intelligence.
Definitely.
We are going to have to decide as a society whether we evaluate it on its own merit or try to keep it permanently tagged and tethered.
We will leave it to the listener to decide whether AI output should be tagged for societal safety or evaluated entirely on their own merit. Which brings us back to where we started. We used to look for a fingerprint to prove a human was there. Now we are spending billions of dollars and writing complex global legislation to engineer a synthetic fingerprint just to prove the machine was there.
Exactly.
The real question is, in our desperate attempt to mark the machine, are we accidentally erasing the human in the process? Thank you for joining us.